Welcome back, children. This is information technology for class 12 and the subject code is 802. This is your textbook, children. Database management applications. Now in last class, second lesson, operating web, was taught to you, and I would like to give you a recap on the previous lesson. The contents that were discussed are: number 1, operating web; 2, online reservation systems; number 3, advantages of online reservation system; number 4, precautions while performing online transaction; number 5, case study, book rail ticket; number 6, e-governance; number 7, e-governance sites; number 8, how does online shopping works; number 9, online courses, tutorials and tests; number 10, project management; number 11, case study, online game, online quiz; and finally number 12, case study, online bill calculator. Now we understood the concept of operating web. We understood what is a web application. An application that can be accessed via a web browser over a network connection is called web-based application. And we understood what is the first category and what is the second category. The first category is nothing but the online reservation system, online shopping and bill payment, which involves money transaction. And the second category involves e-governance and online tutorial and test, which involves only simple form filling and it will not involve any money transaction. And we have seen our Arogya Setu app. I have shown you the COVID-19 vehicle pass and then e-passes to travel, and we understood how an online reservation system can be made in ticket booking in airline, railways, bus, etc. And then we understood about the concept of password. I have shown you a person who has written password, as I can clearly show you here. He has written his password on his hand, so that cannot be done, and passwords need not be advertised. It has to be kept securely. And then we have learned how to book a train ticket in IRCTC. The full form is Indian Railway Catering and Tourism Corporation Limited. How to book a ticket. Summary of all the steps have been taught to you. We understood the concept of e-governance. And I have also shown you the web portal, national portal of e-governance, which is india.gov.in, then GOI web directory, and we have also understood the project management in web-based application development. There are various stages of doing it. What is the requirement, what is the design, how to implement it, how to test it, and then finally sell it. And this is what we have learned in our previous lesson. Now let us move on to the next lesson. Now the next lesson is Java programming. The contents that I will be dealing with for today's session is: number 1, types of programming language; number 2, high level language; number 3, object oriented and procedural language; number 4, low level language; number 5, assembly language; number 6, machine language; number 7, compiler and interpreter; number 8, platform independence; number 9, what is Java bytecode; number 10, Java virtual machine, in short JVM; number 11, Java integrated development environment, in short it is called as IDE. Now let us move on to our third lesson. Now here let me tell you what are the types of programming languages. Now take a look at this slide. Now here, as you can see, one person is sitting in front of the computer. Can you identify who he is? You're right, he is a programmer. He writes the code to communicate instructions to a machine. So a programmer is nothing but the one who write code to communicate instructions to a machine. He also creates programs that control the behavior of a machine. Now Java, what is Java? Whether it is a high level language or a low level language, we will see now. Now Java is a high level language. Now what do you mean by high level language, children? Language which is more user friendly and closer to human language. That is, this language is easily understood by humans because it is written in English language. So the code which is easily understood or read by a common man is called as the high level language. Now the next one, as you can see, it is the combination of alphabets 0 and 1. Now this 0 and 1 is called a low level language. Now this low level language is the language which machine can understand, is called as the low level language. The humans cannot understand that because it is in the form of 0 and 1. Now, and after that, this high level language and the low level language should interact with the hardware to give the final result onto the screen. Hope you understood this concept. The first one, what I taught, is a programmer. A programmer write list of instructions to communicate instruction to a machine. He also create programs that controls the behavior of a machine. The high level language is more user friendly and closer to the human language. It can be easily understood because it is in the form of English language. And the low level language is numerals. It has only 0 and 1, which is a numeric value. The language which machine only can understand is called the low level language. And finally the hardware, the programmer will interact with the software, and finally the result will be displayed onto the hardware, which is the screen. Now here it will clearly give you you can understand what a low level programming language is and what a high level programming language is. Have a look at this picture. Now here, low level language, here as I have clearly given you, it is only in the form of 0 and 1. But what is the advantage here? Look at the processing speed. The processing speed or the processing time is very fast. Now that is the only advantage of having a machine level language, which is a low level programming language. And look at here, a high level programming language is in the form of English. See, this is a simple program which you or I can easily read. Now this is in the form of English. So it is a high level programming language, but the disadvantage is, look at the processing time. The processing time is really slow when compared to the low level programming language. Now this is the disadvantage of a high level programming language. But the advantage is, it is in the form of simple English over here, which you can understand. Now this is a drawback in low level programming language because you or I cannot analyze what it is all about. Hope you understood this concept, children. Now let us move on to the next slide. Here, as we have already gone through programmer, high level, low level and hardware, on the right hand side, the high level programming language is classified into two types. One is the object oriented Number 2 is procedural, and the low level programming language is also broadly classified into two types. One is the assembly language and number 2 is the machine language. We will look into this in the next slide. In the next slide here, it is all about high level programming language. The high level programming language, the first point is it is portable. Now what do you mean by portable, children? Portable means can be easily carried to another place. That is, the program you have written can be accessed in the other computer as well. Number 2, statements are like English language. As it is clearly given here, this is written in simple English. It is not written in zeros or ones, so it is easily understood by human being. And the amount of abstraction provided defines level of programming language. Here we are seeing a new concept called abstraction. What is abstraction, children? What do you mean by abstraction? Now, abstraction is nothing but it is the process of hiding certain details and showing only essential information to the user. Let me give you one example. Your attendance register will have your name, whether you are present or absent for the day, for a particular month, but it will not have your community, your caste, it will not have your date of birth or other information. So it is abstracted. That is what is needed for that particular page attendance. Only that information is shown to you, which is called as abstraction. So the amount of abstraction provided defines level of programming language. And what are the high level languages? I have given you 3. One is C programming, Java programming and Python programming. All these 3 are examples of high level language. Hope you understood this page, children. Can we move on to the next slide? Yeah. Now, what is procedural and what is object oriented? We will see what is procedural and what is object oriented, and I am sure you are quite aware that this procedural and object oriented will come under high level language, which is more user friendly and it is closer to the human language. Now let me tell you what is this procedural language. Program is written as sequence of instruction. What do you mean by sequence, children? What is a sequence? Sequence is nothing but first step, second step, third step, fourth step. So this sequence means 1, 2, 3, 4. It is in a proper order. Let me give you an example. Recipes are given morning steps. So the steps are: first one, I wake up. Number 2, I brush my teeth. Number 3, I open fridge. Number 4, I take milk. Number 5, I warm it in microwave. Now this is procedural. What if I change the order? If I change the order, that means I wake up will come in the last step, which is logically contradicting. So this procedural language should follow the sequence of instruction. The sequence of instruction is it has to go one at a time. So this procedural language is top to bottom approach. That is, it will focus on the first one. After finishing the first one, it will move on to the second. After the second, it comes the third. After third, fourth. After fourth, it will execute the fifth one. So procedural means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the order is changed, the total logic will be in a contradiction. Hope you understood what is called as the procedural language. And now, object oriented language. What do you mean by object oriented language? Now, program is an interaction of functions between objects. Below you have 3 objects. One is object me. Number 2, object fridge. Number 3, object microwave. There are more 2 functions in each object is present. Now in the steps for morning schedule, we have 3 objects. Each of the object maintain their own internal data and have functions which others can use. What is the meaning of this? For example, wake up function is in object me. Now that function, if it is needed, can also be used by other methods, that are other objects that are present inside that object orientation. So hope you understood this concept, that is sharing is quite possible in object oriented programming. One function within one object can be reused by other function. So reusability of code is always possible in object oriented programming language, but it is not applicable in procedural language. Now in procedural language, the focus is on function, not on data. The focus is on function. Number two, it will have a top-down approach. That is, procedural language will have the top-down approach, but the object-oriented programming language will have a bottom-up approach. The meaning of bottom-up approach is it will focus only on data. And finally, it will support the modular approach as well. So hope you understood this procedural and object oriented programming language. I make it very clear. Procedure means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If the order is changed, the whole concept will be contradicting. But object oriented programming is not like that. Any function in any object can be made used by the second or the third class. Hope you understood this concept. Can I move on to the next slide, children? Yeah. Now here, as I have mentioned in the earlier example, the procedural language is written as sequence of instruction. It is the top-down approach. Top-down approach means it will focus on function. Number two, it does not have proper way of hiding data. Like in the previous example, I have given you the attendance register will have your name, the month, whether you are present or absent for the day. It will hide all your other particulars of date of birth, parent name, parent mobile number, your address for communication, your PIN code, your mobile number, etc. etc. So third point, data is not secured in procedural language. Number four, code is interdependent. What is the meaning of inter? Inter means many. Dependent means it is reliable on a particular object. So coding is interdependent. It will depend. Number five, reusability is difficult. It cannot reuse anything because the approach is top down. So one at a time it can read. So reusability is not possible in procedural language. On the other side, object oriented programming, that is, program is an interaction of functions between objects. First one is bottom up approach. The advantage of bottom up approach is here the focus is on data, not on function. The focus is only on data. Number two, helps in wrapping data and function in a class. The class will have both data and function. Wrapping means putting these two in one place. That is, class will have a data and function in that particular class. Number three, helps building secure programs. Here it ensures the secured environment. Number four, coding is modular. Modular means what? Modular means cutting into small pieces. For example, in making of bicycle, you have many spare parts. The cycle, the spokes, the handle, and then there are so many things that are available. So all these spare parts have to be, they have to assemble it to make it as one object. So modular means module 1, module 2, module 3, module 4 and module 5. So all these things are done separately, they are made separately, and finally they are processed as one object. That is called as modular approach. Number 5, can be extended for reuse. So reusability of code is always possible. As in the previous example here, these three objects can make use of the functions that are available, so they don't have to write the code again and again. They can easily reuse the code. Hope you have understood procedural and object oriented language. Now we'll move on to the machine language. As you are quite aware, a machine language is in the form of 0 and 1. As you can see in the picture, it is in the form of numeral 0 and 1. First point, it is directly run on CPU. Number 2, series of bits like zeros and ones. So bit, the term bit here, bit is coming from binary digit. First letter B, second letter I, and the last letter T from the binary digit is taken as bits, and the bit is in the form of 0 and 1. Number 3, tedious. Tedious means very complicated and error prone. A lot of errors will be generated to write code manually. And 4, not portable. That is, the machine language written to one particular computer cannot be transferred to the other computer. It is specifically meant for that particular computer alone. So hope you understood what is machine language. In short, machine language is in the form of zeros and ones here. It is very complex to understand this. It is not in the form of simple English. It can only be understood by the machine computer. And now it is assembly language. Assembly language, number 1, is less error prone. That is, error generation is very less. Number 2, coding is easier than machine language, because machine language is in the form of 0 and 1, but here coding is written in simple English. As you can see, you can easily read all these things. Number 3, replaces 1 and 0. 1 and 0 is numerals. That numerals is replaced with English instructions, which is alphanumeric alphabets. Okay, it is in the form of English instructions. Number 4, mnemonic codes. Mnemonic codes are something like this, like bits and pieces. It is not the full code, it is only a part of the code. It's called mnemonic codes for corresponding machine language. As you can see here, MOV stands for move. So you can easily read that. JMP stands for jump. CMP stands for compare, and ADD stands for add. So each assembly language is specific to a particular computer architecture and sometimes to an operating system. So what do you mean by that? It is specifically meant for, here 3 examples are given. It is specifically meant for a particular computer architecture or an operating system. Here I have given you an example. One is Intel. Based on this, assembly language can be written. Based on Apple, an assembly language can be written. So based on Linux, an assembly language can be written. So it is specific to a particular computer architecture, and sometimes this assembly language is specific to a particular operating system. The operating system is Intel, number 1. Number 2 is Apple operating system. Number 3 is Linux operating system. Now we'll move on to the next one, which is compiler and interpreter. So compiler and interpreter, you will see that first one translates high level instructions into machine language. As you all know, the high level language is in the form of simple English. So the coding what you have written in English is translated into machine language. As you know, machine language is in the form of zeros and ones, that is bits. Number 2, the compiler generates an executable file like .exe. exe stands for executable file. So the source code, which is in the form of .java, is finally generated into an executable file. Okay. Number 2, Interpreter. What is interpreter? So interpreter translates high level language into an intermediate code. So high level language, you already know, it is in the form of English. It is translated into an intermediate code, not as machine language. It is done as an intermediate code. Number 2, each and every line is executed individually. So what will happen if each and every line is executed individually? It becomes, the process speed becomes slower. Okay. Now in the interpreter, the process is from the source code, the interpreter will directly convert it as an output. So there is no need for a machine code. The translation of the high level language into the machine code is avoided. So no compilation step is there for the interpreter. Number 1, no compilation step is involved in the interpreter. Number 2, it executes line by line. Number 3, since it is executing line by line, the process speed is slow. And number 4, it is platform independent. We will see what is called as platform independent in the forthcoming slides. Now here, Java is a platform independent language. What is meant by platform independence? Platform independence means writing codes in one operating system, Windows XP, and executing that code on another platform, Linux. Say for example, you are writing a code in Windows XP. You write the code, it can be run in the same operating system, Windows XP. And you take the same code from that Windows XP and you copy that in Linux, it will also execute the same program. So this is the advantage of using a platform independent language. Say for example, you're having a game. Okay, that game is developed in Windows XP. That is, Microsoft has created that Windows. Okay, has created that gaming which can be played in Windows XP, in Windows platform. The same game, what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy it in Linux operating system. If that game is not played there, I cannot call it as platform independent. So it is platform dependent. So Java is not like that. Java is platform independent. So a program which is written in one operating system, Windows XP, can be played in many operating system. That is, it can play in Linux, it can play in Mac as well. So that is the advantage of Java. WORA, this is very important, children. That is, write once and run anywhere. That is platform independent. What do you mean by write once and run anywhere? As I have given you the example here, you are writing the program in Windows XP. That is, write once in Windows XP and run anywhere. Where are you running it? You can run it in Windows itself as well as Linux as well as Mac. So that is called as WORA. Number 2, bytecode. Bytecode is very, very important in Java, children. Without bytecode is the base in Java programming. So again, it is very, very simple. Bytecode is the machine language. As you know, it is in the form of 0 and 1 of the Java virtual machine. In short, Java virtual machine is called as JVM. By using bytecode execution, Java proves it's a platform independent language. So this platform independence is done only with the help of bytecode. As you know, bytecode is nothing but a machine language which is in the form of 0 and 1. Now here, this is very, very important. Now these steps will make you understand how this Java platform is platform independent. That is first one. How to execution of Java bytecode. Here, as you can see, the source code here, look at the dot, children, the source code. You can type the source code in plain text file and save it with .java extension here. You're typing it in plain code, you can do it in Notepad as well, no issues. It is a text file and you can save it as .java. This is called as your source code. That is point number 1. Now after you do that, point number 2, the source code is compiled into .class file. Now who is going to compile it? Here, Java C is the compiler. As you can see, Java compiler is this one. This Java compiler will compile this source code into a class file. As you can see, *class file. Now this source code, which is in the form of English, is compiled by this Java C, which is the Java compiler, into a machine language .class file, which is called as the bytecode. Now after this transformation, this .class file contains source code in the form of bytecode here. Now this source code is now compiled as .class file, which is in the form of machine language, which is called as the bytecode. The next step is bytecode is a machine language of the Java virtual machine. Now this bytecode is a machine language of Java virtual machine. Now this is the Java virtual machine. This Java virtual machine will have the Java interpreter, that is this one. Okay. Now the Java interpreter is present inside this JVM, and Java virtual machine converts the bytecode into executable code as .obj. That is, here this .class file is now converted as .object file. You can see it below. .object file is given below. Okay. And finally, this .obj file is used to generate the output. It takes this loop and then finally goes and prints the output on the machine. Now this is very important flowchart. I will explain it to you once again. First one is this source code. What is a source code? It is in the form of a simple text file. You type the code, which is in English. You save it as .java. And after doing that, this Java C is the command. The Java C compiler will convert this *.jvg as .class file, which is the bytecode, which is in the form of zeros and ones. And soon after that, the Java virtual machine will contain the interpreter, Java interpreter. That interpreter will convert this *.class file into *.obj, which is clearly given below, children. *.obj. Now this is the object file, and after that this object file is finally, it will take the output onto the screen. Here the output will come onto the screen. Very important. Hope you understood this. I have clearly given you 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally the result is the 5th step. Hope you understood this concept of Java bytecode. This Java bytecode is very important to make this Java a platform independent language. Now, there are different types of JVM available on different operating systems. For Sun Microsystem, there is a separate JVM, Java Virtual Machine. For Microsoft, it is a separate Java Virtual Machine. For IBM, it is again a separate Java Virtual Machine. Same .class file can run on various platforms because it is platform independent. This is the way bytecode executes Java programs. Proves Java is a platform independent language. So different platform, that is different operating system, they are not operating on the same JVM. So here there are 3 different JVMs for 3 different operating systems is what is all about in this slide. Now here this is the NetBeans icon, children. You can see here, to write a Java program you need a text editor. for writing the code. In the previous example, I have clearly given you the 5 steps. There, the text editor is only the notepad, and the Java compiler for compiling the code into bytecode. So two things are necessary. One is the text editor, which is to write the code, and Java compiler to compile the code into bytecode. Second point, there are a wide variety of Java integrated development environments, IDEs, available in the market that come equipped with the text editor number 1 and Java compiler number 2, thus simplifying writing, compiling and executing Java programs. That is IDE, that is IDE. IDE stands for Java Integrated Development Environment. It will have all 3 in one place. Like, you need not type the code in separate text editor. You need not compile it in another location, and you need not execute it in different locations. So all these 3 are available in one common place. Like, you go to a mall, you can watch a cinema, you can buy some snacks for you, you can buy some textile material, you can all in multiple tasking work, you can do it in a mall. Similarly, this IDE is one place where you can type the code using text editor. Soon after you finish your text editing, it will allow you to compile it in the same place. That is the second point. And finally, you can execute it there itself. So 3 in 1. So that 3 in 1 is possible in IDE. And finally, third point, most of them are freely downloadable from the internet. We will be using the open source and free Java NetBeans IDE for writing Java programs. That is, this platform you can download it from the internet and you can work on it. The NetBeans icon is clearly given on the right hand side. This is the NetBeans icon. Now you can easily download it in Google. You search for it and you will get the .exe, and you can easily download the file onto the computer. Now here, this is the initial screen of the IDE. Here, as you can see, this is called the source package, Hello World. Here the source package is Hello World and hello world.java. Can you see here? The package Hello World contains the file hello world.java. Name is the same. Hello World is the source and hello world.java is the file. Okay, and as you can see, multi-line comment is given here. Slash here, this slash and star. Here you have the first line, second line, third line, and last line. The ending statement is star and slash. That means all 3 lines are called as comment entry. So many comments, if you want to make it, you should make use of slash star followed by line 1, line 2, line 3, and close it with star and slash. That is called as multi-line comment. This will not be executed by the interpreter. Okay, it is only for the understanding of the programmer what this line is all about. And as you can see, the bottom line that is here, this is a single line comment. As you can see above, it is slash star, many lines, star slash, but here since it is only one line is given, it is given as slash slash. So slash slash stands for a single comment, and this is important. The class declaration name of the class must match with the source code file name. What do you mean by this? That is, here the hello world is the name of the class, that is public class. The name of the class is hello world here. If you could see on top here, hello world.java is the source code. So this name and this name should be the same. That is, the name of the source code, that is hello world.java, and the name of the class should match. That is very, very important. Only then your Java program will during runtime you will get the output. Hope I have made this clear. Only 4 points I have taught you here. That is, one is the source package. The package hello world contains the file hello world.java. This is the package. The package name is hello world. Okay, and then this is the multi-line comment, this is the single line comment, and this class name and this source code name should match. Both have the same name. Look at here, H is capital, again here it is H is capital. Always remember, Java is case sensitive. If you have to write in capital H, if capital H is the syntax, you have to follow that capital H, because capital H and small h is totally different in a case sensitive language. Now in the next slide here, notice that as you type the dot after the word system, NetBeans will display a list of available options. You can scroll down the display list to reach the word out, and then either double click or press enter. That means here, as you can clearly see here, you are going to type the code. The code is system.out.println. So when you type system dot, it will give you the list of all the commands that are available under system. So as you can see here, it is out, which is clearly given in green color. What is out? Out is the print screen. Print stream. Okay. So as soon as you press dot, it will give you the list. You can go there, double click that to choose the next option. Clear, children? Now here, the full form is system dot. It showed the list of all the commands that are available. You have chosen dot out. Then you put a dot. Again, it will show you a lot of options. There you select println. Println stands for print line. Then open the bracket, double quotes, type hello world, close the double quote, close the bracket, and finally semicolon, which will clearly give the end of the line. After you do that, you can execute the command. You can either give like this, you press this one, this play button you can press, or else you can make use of the command shift and then press F6. When you press shift button and F6, you will see the output given below. You can clearly see hello world here, built successfully. So successful is coming. Built successful means you have successfully executed the output of that particular command, that is hello world. Has the final println, the print line, you have printed it as hello world. So hello world is printed in the next line, followed by built successful confirmation given to you. Now, how to create a new project? This is very important, children. As soon as you open that NetBeans, it will ask you to create a new file. Here, click on new file. New file, the command is Control N, as it is given very clearly over here, Control N. So you can do that, and soon after that it will have a list of this one. Now this will have many steps. As you can see, the first step is choose file type. Project, you can give it as hello world. As I told you, the class name and the source code name should be the same. So I am giving it as hello world. Soon after this project hello world, there are many categories that are available. You choose Java category, and after that choose Java class under file type. Okay, and then click on this next button. Once you click on this next button, you will see this one, that is the second point, name and location. It will ask you what is where you want to locate the file. You can give a different name. Now this is under hello world because the project hello world is already created. So you are going to create a new class which is lesson 3. Now this lesson 3 will be found under this hello world. Okay, you have already created this hello world. Again, hello world will have another project which is hello world. To distinguish many projects, I am giving it as lesson 3 since we are in lesson 3. I will tell you in the next slide. It will be very clear to you. So the location is here. This is the path which will clearly give you the location. And if you already have this lesson 3, bottom you can see the file already exists. As you can see here, the file lesson3.java already exists. So you can use some other file. Since lesson 3 is already available, it is giving you a caution message. It is already existing. Hope you understood this. And as I told you here, this hello world is already created. Hello world.java is already created. Now you are going to create another file with the name of your class lesson3.java. You can create many files under it. So as and when you create files, all these files will be listed one below the other under this source package. Hope this is understood. I have clearly mentioned over here, lesson3.java is created in package hello world. You want to create lesson 4, you can create lesson 4, lesson 5, lesson something like that. So all those things will be one below the other. Now this is the screen. Package is hello world. Under that you have the class lesson 3. Okay, and this lesson 3 and here this lesson 3 should be the same. Only then your thing will be, the output will be clearly shown to you. Now this is the name of the class and this is your source code. Okay, and we'll move on to the next one, that is data types. This is very important. Data types are very important in Java. Now before that, Java primitive data types are given. What is Java primitive data types? Let us discuss that. Java primitive data type can have only single value. So single value, if it has, then it is called as the primitive data type. They do not have any special capabilities. Point number 3, it contains boolean, that is yes or no. That is, when you toss a coin, you can have either head or tail, which is called as the boolean. And numeric type, which is in the form of integer, float, and then character. Now you have understood what is called as primitive data type. That is, primitive data type will have only single value. Let us see what is non-primitive data type. Non-primitive data types can have more than one value. What are they? They are strings and arrays. Now in your textbook we have only the Java primitive data types. Let us see what it is. Data type is byte, type of value is integer, size is 8-bit. For short it is integer, 16-bit. For integer it is integer, int integer 32 bits, long integer 64 bits, float floating point 32 bits, double floating point 64 bits, char character 16 bits, boolean true or false 1 bit. Now this size is nothing but where the data is going to be stored. It has to be stored in some common location. So the storage size is given as 8 bits, 16 bits, and we will see how this storage is understood. A bit or the binary digit is the smallest unit to measure memory. 1 byte is equal to 8 bits. Memory is divided into bytes. Each variable needs certain number of bytes to store values. So for integer it is 4 bytes. In terms of bits, it is 4 multiplied by 8, which is 32 bits here. 4 multiplied by 8 is equal to 32 bits. For short it is 2 bytes. Short it is 2 bytes. So 2 multiplied by 8, which is 16 bits. Similarly int is 4 bytes. 4 multiplied by 8, which is 32 bits. Long is 8 bytes. So 8 multiplied by 8, which is here 64 bits. So always remember, it is calculated in terms of bits. So next we will move on to how we will calculate the range. The formula is minus 2 upon number of bits minus 1 comma 2 to the power number of bits minus 1 minus 1. Now this is the formula which is very important. A short data type takes 2 bytes. 2 bytes is nothing but 2 multiplied by 8 bits, which is equal to 16 bytes. Now we will see the starting range and ending range for this short data type. That is, range is given. You apply this formula over here, that is minus 2 upon 16 minus 1 comma 2 upon 16 minus 1 minus 1, which is equal to minus 2 upon 15 comma 2 upon 15 minus 1. And when you calculate this, the range is minus 32 comma 768, that is the lower range, comma 32 comma 767 is the higher range. Always remember, range has the lower side and it also has the upper side. This is very important, children. This formula you have to keep it in mind. When you keep it in mind, you don't have to by heart this. You can easily substitute the values in the formula. It is common for this byte, short, int, long, float, for all the other data types. This range is very important. This formula is very important. We will see how Java NetBeans shows you the result on the program. Here, as you can see, I have given system.out.println. short is nothing but the data type, dot minimum value I have given. What is the minimum value of the range and what is the maximum value of the range? I have typed it here, and soon after that I press shift plus F6 and it clearly gives me the lower range as minus 32 768, which is the lower range, and 32 767, which is the higher range. Build successful. So this is how you can check the minimum and maximum range of a particular data type. Now we have seen it for the data type called short. We will see it for others as well. Now here I am checking it for long. As you can see, long is given over here, minimum underscore value, long, maximum underscore value, and after selecting this print, shift plus F6 and getting the minimum value. Again, you don't have to by heart, you have to remember the formula of minus n upon number of bits minus 1 comma 2 to the power number of bits minus 1 minus 1. Now this, the first line is the minimum one and the next one is the maximum one. Minimum one you can easily understand, it has the minus symbol before, so it is the lower range, and positive sign here below, which is the upper range. Hope this is understood. Previously we have seen it for short, now we have seen it for long. We will see it for others as well. Now here, as you can see, I have checked it for byte, minimum value, maximum value, for long, minimum, maximum, for integer, what is the minimum, maximum, for character, what is the minimum, maximum, for float, what is the minimum, maximum, and for double, what is the minimum, maximum. And after that, how will you execute it? Yes, you are right. Press shift plus F6. Here you can see very clearly the minimum value, which is in minus, the maximum value is in positive. The next one, minimum, maximum, you can see for all others. Build successful. You can try all these commands, children. Now this is very important. The main method is very important because that is the first function which will be called by the interpreter. Now why the main method is given so long? There is a purpose of doing it, children. Let us see. Now See, there is a question mark given on top. Why should I give public? Why should I give static? Why should I give void? Why should I give main, small letter? Why not capital letter? And why should I give string arguments? String arguments, in short, I call it as string args. ARGS stands for args. Args stands for arguments. Now, let us see public. Why this main method is called as public. Before going to that, please understand the Java virtual machine, the interpreter will call only the main function. Even if your Java program have thousands of function, the first function to be called is the main function. Public means visibility mode. Let me give you one example. You have this lighthouse, okay, in a big ocean. The lighthouse is visibility is, it is visible to all. Any ship which do not know the distance or which do not know the way, they can clearly see that lighthouse and they can come to the shore, seashore. So public means it is open to all. That means any number of function that is declared within that program can have an access to, if it is declared as public visibility. So public visibility is open to all. It can be accessed by any function. It can be accessed by any class. So public is very, very important. Now public is a keyword where class and function can be accessed anywhere within the program. The next point is, during Java runtime, even if it is in different path, the public is accessible. Very, very important. One public you understood now. Now it is lighthouse. Taking the same example of lighthouse, public you understood. What is private? Private means on a sea there are many ships. Many people, they have compass inside the ship. So rich people, they have a compass so that they can easily find out where the distance is, whether they have to move on to the north or south or east or west. So since it is a private property, the other ship, which is accompanying, that is close to 1 kilometer radius, they cannot take this compass because it is a private property. So since public is given to the main method, it is accessible to all, like the lighthouse. But since the magnetic compass is private, it cannot be accessed to all the methods. Hope you understood the idea of what is public. Public is open to all. Private is, it is restricted to only the people who own it. Next, what is static? Static means a class need an object to be created. First point. Second point, without creating an object for a class, a function within a class cannot be called. Do remember, main is the first function that will be called by the interpreter. So when it is called immediately, you cannot create object for that. And since to overcome this, the static method can invoke even without creating an object of a class. Now what is the drawback, children? Since main is the first function which is to be called, you do not have time to create an instance, create an object for that particular function. So even without creating an object, if you have a static, it is possible. So to overcome this, static method can be invoked even without creating an object of a class. That is the main reason why static is mentioned as the second keyword in the method, so that you don't have to create an object for that particular class. Hope this is understood. Now you have understood what is public, what is private, what is static as well. Now let us move on to void. Void means nothing, children. Void means no return data type. Interpreter do not expect any return type. Nothing is passed to JVM, Java Virtual Machine. So void means it will not return any data type or it will not return any value. Void means null. Main. Main is Java virtual machine will call the main function first. The interpreter have the instruction from JVM, strict instruction. In fact, I would say it is a strict instruction from JVM to call the main method first. So even if you have 100 methods written in a Java program, the first method that will be called is a main function. Hope you understand what is called as a main function. We will move on to the next one, which is called as string args. String args is nothing but the string argument. String argument. Second point, it gets the command line argument to process the program during runtime. What is the command line argument? For example, to add two numbers, you need those two numbers from the user. So the user may be asked to enter those two numbers. If the user is entering 2 and 3, based on that command line argument, the addition will be performed on those two data, that is 2 plus 3. Finally, the result is displayed onto the screen as 5. So that 2 and 3 are nothing but command line arguments. Hope this slide is very informative to you. We have learnt why this method has so many keywords. One is public, one is static, what is void, what is a main function, what is string argument or string args. Now next we will move on to string variables. A variable of a primitive data type. Primitive data type, as I told you, it has only one value. Char can be used to store a single character. To assign a value to a char variable, we enclose the character between single quotes. Very important, children. When it is declared as char, you can see here you have a single quote, but when it is declared as string, below you have this double quotes. I hope it is clear to you here. When it is string, it is double quote. When it is char, it is single quote. This is what you have to understand. So to store more than one character, we use the string class in Java. To assign a text value to a string variable, we enclose the text between double quotes. Example is given very clearly. And finally, we use this plus. Plus symbol is very important. This plus is nothing but the plus operator concatenates the string together. What is the meaning of concatenating? Concatenating means joining the first name, the middle name and the last name. If you have three names separately, concatenating means you can club or you can join all three and you may call it as one single name. The output from the statement given below is very simple. Mayank is the first name, M is the middle name and Saxena is the last name. So using that plus operator, we have clubbed or we have joined the first name, the middle name and the last name. Hope you understood this concept of string variable, which is very simple. For character it is a single quote and for string it is double quote. You may join them together with the help of a plus operator. Can we move on to the next slide, children? Now here, variable names. What are the precautionary methods that you have to use or follow when you dealing with variables? The first point is variable name can begin with either an alphabetic character, an underscore is given very clearly, or a dollar sign. However, convention is to begin a variable name with a letter. They can consist of only alphabets, digits and underscore. The second one, the variable names must be one word. Spaces are not allowed in variable names. For example, first name and last name, if you want to make it as a variable name, if you give a space, it will not be taken into account. Below it is very clearly given, underscores are allowed. Total Underscore marks is allowed, but total space marks cannot be called as a variable. So space is not allowed. Third point, there are some reserved words in Java that cannot be used as variable name. For example, int. What is int, children? Int is data. So data type. So this data type, you cannot call it as a variable. Similarly, char, C-H-A-R, you cannot call it as a variable name. Similarly, boolean, you cannot call it as a variable name. Long, short, there are so many things that are available. Since it is a reserved word, it cannot be assigned as a variable name because it has a different purpose. Number 4, Java is case sensitive language. For example, the variable name percentage differs from the variable name capital letters, all capital letters percentage, or first letter capital. So percentage lowercase is different from percentage uppercase or the sentence case percentage. So this Java is a case sensitive language. But what is Java? Java is a platform independent language, which is very, very important. And the fifth point is, it is good practice to make variable names meaningful. The name should indicate the use of that particular variable. And the last point is, you can define multiple variables of the same type in one statement by separating each with a comma. For example, you can define 3 integers variables as shown. Int is the data type. Number 1 is the variable, comma, the second variable is number 2, comma, the third variable is number 3. What do you understand from this? The variable name number 1, number 2, number 3 is given in one line, and all are going to have a common data type, which is integer. Hope you understood these 6 points, which is very, very useful, and it is very important that you need to follow this rule or the syntax, which is nothing but the variable name declaration, precautionary measures that you have to follow when you are dealing with a variable name. Now, let us understand what are the operators. As you can see in calculator, you will have many symbols, plus, minus, star, slash. They are meant for addition, multiplication, subtraction and division. Now we will see what this operator, what is the broad classification of an operator. First is arithmetic operators. What are they? Arithmetic, as you know, it is max, plus, minus, star and slash. These 4 you are aware of it. The next one is percentage, that is modulo. The modulo symbol will collect only the remainder value. Plus stands for adding +1 to the result. Minus stands for adding -1 to the result. Now let us see the example of this. The example is given very clearly. Int is the data type. So A is holding the value 20. Variable B is holding the value 30. A++ stands for, already A is 20. ++ means A is equal to A plus 1. Now the result of A++ is 21. A, which is 20 in first statement, when I give A minus minus, it is exactly equal to A is equal to A minus 1. That means 20 minus 1, and finally A minus minus value become 19. A percentage B is nothing but 20 percentage 30. 20 percentage 30. It will skip the divisor, the quotient, and it will take only the remainder value. The remainder value is 10. So the result for A percentage B is 10. Now let us see the relational operator. As the name suggests, relational operator will relate the left hand side value and the right hand side value. Let us see. Now less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, these 4 things you are quite aware. Let us find what is equal to and what is not equal to with an example. Now A is equal to 20, B is equal to 30. A equal to B means left hand side value and the right hand side value, if they are equal, then you will call it as true. Now here in this case, A is 20, which is not matching with the value of B. So ultimately the relational operator equal to will result in false. A not equal to B means, what is A? A is 20. Not equal to B means, of course, 20 is not equal to 30, and ultimately the result is true. That is what we have declared it below. Assignment operators. We will see what is assignment operator. Equal to, plus equal to, minus equal to. This you already know. Star equal to, slash equal to, percentage equal to. Now this slash equal to and percentage equal to is, you need not confuse with that. Slash equal to will take only the quotient and percentage equal to will take only the remainder value. Let us see with an example. A is 20, B is 30. A slash equal to B means A equal to A slash B. What is A? A is 20. 20 slash 30. Now what is the divider value? That is the quotient value. The quotient value is 0 because it cannot be divisible. It is not divisible. So the quotient is 0. But look at the remainder value. The remainder value is 20. And finally that remainder value is going to the modulo symbol, which is percentage symbol. Now finally the operator is logical operator. Logical means either or. Just like in the previous example, I have given you a coin. If you toss a coin, you will get either a tail or a head. Ampersand, ampersand, not, and then or. Ampersand, ampersand is and, followed by or, that is two pipe symbol, and finally followed by not operator. With an example, A is 20, B is 30. Ampersand, ampersand of B means both the sides the condition should be true. Since both the sides the condition is not true, finally it is false. A either or means in any case it is going to be true, and not of A means it is finally it is given as false because A is not becomes a false. Hope this slide will clearly make you understand what are operators, what are the different, how broadly it is classified into, what are the symbols that are available in the second level, and finally in the third level I have clearly given you the examples in every symbols in it. Now hope this is very informative, children. Can we move on to the next slide? Yeah, finally we have come to the end of this session, and I hope this session is very quite informative, and you are making use of your holidays in a useful way. And as you all know, the learning process is a lifelong learning process. It will not stop today, it will not stop tomorrow. It is a continuous process. It is a procedural language process, as I would like to say. So keep learning every day, every minute, new things, and I hope this session will definitely be very informative to you. And thanks for your cooperation, children. We will meet in next class. Thank you.